Welcome to the BOPTMN podcast. Following is my conversation with Sue O'Brien. In the podcast, we talk extensively about her career as an educator. We talk about fitness, nutrition, among other topics. I first became aware of Sue on the board of trustees for our local pool, but also as one of Kaylin's teachers. Something I regret that I didn't ask Sue about, but kind of told me that Sue was a different kind of teacher, was during the year that she was a teacher for Kaylin, she went to all of her students' houses, or at least I should say most of them. So Sue came to our house, got to know Kaylin's living situation. She got to know other students' living situation because she wanted to know more about her students, something she'd actually recommend to other teachers to try to do. But to me, it showed the level of dedication that she had as a teacher, and was one of the things that definitely had me thinking that she'd be a great guest to have on and talk about her career as a teacher. I also run into Sue here and there on my runs. I see her out running. We both swim at the same pool. I've seen her out biking. So I do think it turned into a pretty interesting conversation. She has a lot to share, and I hope you enjoy.
Nutrition, that's a good one.
Yeah, and they're not. Yeah. I try to put them, like when back in school when I used to do like speeches and stuff.
Yeah.
I tried to trim it down to like just reminder words kind of.
Yeah.
So I only had to peek down, not read. And
Right. That's good. That's good.
It worked well, so I'm kind of copying this and just.
Plus and you know what, after I have a meeting at my desk at school, especially online, I'll find that my whole desk is filled with Post-its.
Right.
Why don't I organize them in a notebook or something? I don't. I have the Post-its all over the place. Or this is my worst thing, is I'll take a piece of paper that I've already written on, flip it over, and write something on the back.
Right.
And then you look at this is my to-do list. And what do? Throw it away. And something important's on the back.
I'll fold mine in half, and I'll write on the back half, and then I'll fold it in half again. I have plenty of paper.
Yeah.
But I'll keep, and like you said, if I have to like be disciplined to I'm gonna go back and make sure everything's crossed off, and yeah.
I had this really nice notebook once. It has a leather cover and all that. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to flip a page and keep doing this. And when this is full, I'll get another one. I've known people that worked well.
Right.
It's got 5 pages filled. It's on a bookshelf and Post-its. So
I know how it is.
It's ridiculous. So.
I had just made me think of it. I had a leather notebook, just like you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I challenged myself to write left-handed.
Oh, no.
For a month.
Oh, my gosh.
It was quite a brain challenge.
Yeah, that is.
I could write decently well, but as soon as I had to move my hand, and as soon as it got out of my sweet spot, it'd get really scribbly as my arm tried to catch back up. Oh man, it was a great mental little challenge.
Because you're pushing when you write the other way, your hand is pushing the page away. I don't know how left-handed people do it.
Right. And you keep it up just, you kind of balance it just. And a friend of mine that I was talking to about it, he's like, you should try it on a whiteboard. It's way harder.
Oh, right, because you're going to smear it.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Or we have
just writing on a whiteboard. I mean, you're a teacher, so you're used to it.
But I'm right-handed. And then, but we have not a whiteboard, but a light board. You know what a light board is?
I had a smart board in my classroom.
Nope, a light board. A light board is when you can stand up and I can write, and it comes across. I can write Iron Man, and it looks like I'm writing. It's clear, so but it mirrors it back, so the person on video can see it, and it's coming. So it looks like you're just writing in the air, just like this, and it's coming through correctly to them. It's really cool. We bought one for each school for COVID, to have the flipped classroom teaching. It was really interesting,
That is very interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. I don't think it's being used that much this year, but if you're doing lessons ahead of time, it's a good thing. They're very expensive, but COVID money.
When I was teaching, we had, do you remember the ITV systems that were in the school?
Yep.
And nobody was using them.
Right.
So adult ed kind of was like,
let's start using
Right,
it for
yeah.
all of our stuff.
Right.
So I ended up being their like ITV teacher for adult ed.
Yeah.
Like, teaching other teachers how to do it. And
Right. Yeah.
it was such a cool class.
Yeah.
I found it distant, like the biggest challenge was it was a different level of teaching. You had to be like the director, and you know, you had to keeping people organized into what you're talking about was so
Right.
much different than teaching in a classroom.
Right.
It was such a different level, and
Right.
and if you're just standing there kind of doing the same thing, obviously your students are going to get bored. They're
Right.
looking how to keep them engaged.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
it was a great for me as a I always had like imposter syndrome as a teacher because I kind of happened into it and
Right.
never felt really confident. I didn't have a teaching
Yeah.
degree behind me,
Right.
you know, and it was a great way. I got a lot better at teaching because
Right. Oh yeah.
doing that.
Because you were modeling it too.
Right.
And that's what my job is now.
Right.
So I love that because it raises the bar. And if I'm telling them they have to have their, learning targets, or if they need to have, success criteria for their students, I better have it
Right.
before I start talking to them.
Yeah.
So that's really
Cool.
interesting. Yeah. And last year I did remote teaching. I was in charge of the remote teachers. And so I tried really hard to model for them different things. Plus, I couldn't meet with them. They're all at home.
Right.
And I was in my office or at home. And so I learned technology like the night before I taught it. So it was really fun.
Right.
It was very,
Right.
very interesting. I think I like that distraction where I go and have to learn something
Right.
new.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the fun part. So,
All right. I won't get to all
So-
that, but let's go
okay. Yeah.
back to the where I want to start off. So, there's a question I've been asking at the end of all my podcasts, and I realized on my last one with a coworker of mine that I kind of put him on the spot by not telling him what the question was ahead of time. So I'm
Okay.
gonna tell you the question now.
Okay.
The answer,
And this will be at the
I'll
end?
save the answer at the end.
Okay.
But what gives you hope for the future is the question.
Ooh, okay.
All right. So just keep that in mind. But I've challenged myself that every time I do a podcast, I want a different answer.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give you my answer now. And teachers like you are what give me hope for the future.
Oh, wow.
I look back at some of the teachers that were very influential and kind of set me on the path that I ended up on, and then I remember, I'll get into some of the details later on, but when Kaylin had you as a teacher, it felt different. It was the first time she was, I asked Kaylin today about, what do you remember about Mrs. OB? And she's like, it was fifth grade, Dad. I don't remember fifth grade.
Right, exactly.
And she remembers some of the things that happened during the trip and
Right.
some larger details. But I remember Dee and I feeling quite lucky that Kaylin got you as a teacher, and consistently felt that through the whole process. And we were a little sad that Logan never had you as a teacher. And then recently we found out that Melissa had you as a mentor.
I don't.
Just recently, she was.
Did she have a different last name?
No, so she's a new teacher.
Yeah.
She just took a job in Dexter, ended up, but she was shadowing in Hamden, and you wrote her a great. She said the Melissa Camara, different last name,
Yeah.
dark hair. Oh, do we have? There's a picture of her there, but she's really young. But she said you were the best.
Oh,
It
okay.
was one of the things, and I'm like, I'm not surprised.
You sure it's the same person?
I'm
You sure it
quite
was
sure.
me? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll show you a picture
Yeah.
when you're leaving. I'll show you a picture.
So
of her.
she was. What was she doing in the district? She was doing.
Shadowing. She'd finished her degree.
Yeah.
And was literally in the last few hours that she had to shadowing. I'm thinking, or
Yeah.
it's not really student teaching. Maybe it was student teaching, or I don't know what they call it at the end. That you had her last bit she had to do.
Yeah. That would be student teaching probably. Unless
she was
did
like-
she work as
She would have been the younger. I know she.
was it at Reedsbrook or was it at Weatherby?
it-
Or it could have been.
I think even the younger, because she's a third grade teacher, is which
Okay.
where she ended up, and that was kind of her goal. I know she was right around that,
Yeah.
maybe third to fifth grade
So it
classroom.
must have been at
I
Weatherby.
think it was.
Yeah. How many years ago was it? Just.
That was this year. Like,
Oh, this
we're talking
year.
like a few months ago. Like,
Oh, okay.
like
Oh, she was student. I know who she is.
dark hair.
She
real
was
dark,
student
thick
teaching
hair.
with Lauren Lum in Winniport,
Oh,
And
that-
so she
okay.
was she taught remotely. She was so good.
And she bounced around.
Oh my gosh,
She would
she
go to
was
sometimes
so
a Hamden
good.
and
Yeah.
Interport and
Yeah,
yeah.
I do know. Yes,
Yeah.
she was so good.
Yeah.
Yes.
She-
Okay.
she
I was thinking it was way back, so that's what. Yes, and it was remote, so I did meet her online many
That makes
times.
sense. Right.
So
Yeah.
the teachers I worked with last year, I kind of knew some of them, but I knew them because I met with them online almost daily, and
Right.
she was
Right.
right in there. She
Yeah.
student taught with a really good teacher too.
Yeah.
Just sidebar. And now I run into them in the hall and they go, "Oh, I had no idea you were so tall." Because we're all
Right.
like this on the computer. So I
Absolutely.
just I've had 3 people say that to me.
That's
so,
funny.
Yep.
So are you somebody that's always known from a young age that you were going to be a teacher? Was it like your
Yes.
calling?
Yes, I did. 2nd grade, Mrs. Jackson. And that's the same story that most teachers, I think, would tell you,
Really?
is that it would be somebody that influenced them. Not totally, but
Right.
there's a lot of teachers that have the same story. It's like, I went to school and I just loved school because I loved that teacher and I wanted to become a teacher. So my 2nd grade teacher and then my 5th grade teacher was a character, just Mr. Edinger. And these were both in Orono, and he entertained us a lot. He sang a lot, and he had us do craft projects a lot. I don't know how much I learned, but I loved school.
Right.
But isn't that half the battle, loving
Right,
school?
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I think that was the reason, and I can remember in 6th grade walking into school one day and saying, "Oh my gosh, I don't know how to become a teacher." So I went up to the substitute teacher that day and I said, "So what are you majoring in college?" She goes, "Education." And I'm like, "Education? Okay." So that was it. I thought I was always going to be a 2nd grade teacher. I've never been a 2nd grade teacher. but it was, it was definitely my dream. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
And then did you go to Maine?
I went to Farmington.
Okay.
Yep. And because I didn't feel like I needed to go far with that, but I went to UMF, and the reason being is I interviewed both there and at Orono, and the dean at Orono was a friend of my parents, and he goes, "You know what, if you're going into education, you need to go to Farmington." I'm like, okay. And I grew up in Orono. I didn't really want to stay in Orono.
Right.
So it was what I
Right.
wanted to hear.
Right.
So,
So I grew up in Old Town.
oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
I did go to Orono.
Oh, okay.
It was just far enough away from me.
Right, right. That's funny. My sister went to Orono, but she had done a foreign exchange to Norway
Right,
for a year,
right.
and then she did an exchange to Canada for a year once she was in school. So she didn't really stay around, but she did
Right.
graduate from
Right.
UMO. I did my master's at UMO. But,
Was that?
yeah.
Did you do that right after, or like a few years later, or?
I waited probably 4 years to do my master's.
Yeah.
So.
Right. And what was the master in education too?
Mm-hmm. Yep, just I was teaching 8th grade, so 8th grade literature. So, and then as soon as I finished my master's, I got a job in 5th grade and stayed there for 30 years.
Wow.
So I really liked 5th grade. But you know, when I first started teaching, I was a very different teacher than I am now.
I wanted to ask you this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
It's for some reason in my mind, I thought good teaching was being very strict. And don't get me wrong, I was always strict, and I always had a lot of routines with my classes. But I'm thinking straight rows, every desk was lined up perfectly, everything was neat and clean, and the students were quiet. And so if the principal walked in my room and everyone was quiet, I thought that was good teaching.
Right.
That is the worst teaching, I found out down the road. And I think that I like being organized, but students need to talk, students need to get up and move around, students need to get their hands wet and dirty to learn, just like we all do. They need to be excited about going to school, and I need to be excited about going to school too. So I always had to change things. I couldn't do the same thing
Right.
always.
Right.
So I think those are the keys to how I changed throughout teaching.
Was there something that happened, or how did you figure out that it wasn't working?
It was working. It just wasn't engaging, and it wasn't great learning.
I guess it probably at some
I
point
think
wasn't engaging for you.
it wasn't engaging for me. So if I was bored, the kids must have
Right,
been bored.
right.
Yes. I think the turning point
Careful
was.
of tapping too much. The mic picks up
Okay,
tap. I
yeah.
learned that in my last podcast.
Okay. Yeah. No
Light
tap.
taps are fine, but loud
No
taps
tap.
are like bass drums.
Okay. I think it's Elaine Jones. Now, you met Elaine Jones at Burnt Island, right?
I didn't go.
Oh, you didn't go to Burnt Island. Okay. She is the mover and shaker of Burnt Island. We moved out to Monroe Road, and we were building a house. We had a bonfire in the driveway, just getting rid of some brush, and this lady drives in on 2 wheels, and she says, "Hi, I'm your neighbor. We're building a house down the road too." So she introduces herself, and she says, "I work for the Department of Marine Resources. I teach science classes that are recertification. Every teacher needs recertification."
Right.
So she talked me into taking one of her classes. Well, I didn't need recertification credits, but I was teaching 5th grade, and she was a nice lady.
Right.
So it was at Hampden Academy, and she'd bring in coolers full of animals, ocean animals, and each class we would take out a different phylum of animals. We'd learn all about them, and she'd like, "Oh, take the cooler to school tomorrow," because she lived right here in
Right,
town.
right.
So I'd take the cooler in, we'd ice it down, we'd take good care of it, and I fell right in love with it. The kids were so excited, and I couldn't wait to share those animals
Right.
and teach everything I had learned the night before to those students. So I really think that's what turned my straight rows and no
Right.
talking into talking, engaging, and just getting excited about whatever they wanted to do, project-based learning.
Right.
I loved it.
Yeah.
So
That Burnt Island trip, that's definitely one of the things that Kaylin brought up. And
yeah,
so how that, logistics wise, that must have been a nightmare.
it was,
Or-
especially because Elaine found that I was a captive audience. So I was like, she hooked me right in.
Right.
And plus she was a neighbor, our kids were friends. She was working, I think, in Hollowell at that time for the state, and she decided she needed to build an aquarium. So she found this space in Booth Bay Harbor. She got the aquarium going. She got us to come and help with the presentations with that. Then she had the aquarium going, and then she decided she needed the whole lighthouse island. So she acquired that for the Department of Marine Resources, and she kept hooking me in. And I had her youngest son in class, Ben, and not to be confused with you.
Right.
And she said, "I think we need to do something different. We need to get those kids out here overnight."
Right.
So we spent the winter planning all these activities we could do with the kids, figuring out buses and tents and all these different things, and
Right.
that's how it all developed. Years later, she had the whole education center built, and she was able to have students overnight and teacher training and all this. So she was a mover and a shaker, and I just followed her right along for
Right.
many, many years. So, but I have to give her credit for changing my teaching as
That's
a result. Yeah.
And how cool was it? So when Kaylin was going, maybe when Logan, Mr. Linderman,
Yeah.
right, had
Yeah.
gone, and
Yeah.
then a student had come and then
Yes.
to teach. That must have
Yeah.
been so cool.
It was because, as a 5th grader, Matt went, and he loved it so much. And then as a teacher, that was his big goal, was to
Yeah.
do Burnt Island. So he did it for a couple of years. He did the first year with me, and then he finally got it, so he took it over. And now he is assistant principal in Booth Bay Harbor.
Oh, really?
So he is still involved.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Booth Bay Harbor is where I started elementary school
Oh, really?
for a couple of years.
Yeah.
That was a blur for me.
Yeah.
We'll get to that too. So what, I'm interested in how you stay motivated as a teacher. Like, how do you keep finding, I'm sure year to year, week to week, you can have a group that's a much more challenging group that takes a lot more out of you to stay motivated every day.
Yes.
How do you,
Um,
how do you address that?
I think that keeping myself engaged, doing things differently, always trying new things. I think that's it. That's the key for me. I'm not sure that's a key for everybody.
Right.
Some people are better off if they are doing something they're really confident with, but I need to get excited and try something new.
Right.
And that's where I went with the instructional coaching. So I taught 8th grade for a while, I'd say about 5 years, and then 5th grade for about 30 years. And then I went into the instructional coaching, and I was doing some of that on the side. I started off with science coaching after school, and then doing part-time
No, that's
teaching.
for like teachers.
Yeah, so
Right.
it's job embedded professional development.
Yeah.
So I go into their classrooms. We talk about what they would like to see that, what they want to work on, and it's student centered. It's not teacher centered. It's not changing a teacher or making or fixing a broken teacher.
Right,
it's
right.
nothing like that.
Right.
It's only if I'm invited also.
Right.
And so they want me there, which makes a big difference. And they pick an area that they want to work on. So it could be looking at data and how they want to move their students forward. It could be classroom management. It could be working on their standards. It could be anything that they want.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I got lucky. I was teaching adult ed.
Yep.
And all my students, for the most part, wanted to be there.
Right.
There was, and
Yeah.
I remember kind of thinking
Yeah.
when I was, so the market had fallen apart, and I needed to find some kind of different career path. Architecture was not, people weren't building houses anymore, so I
Right.
needed to find something else.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I've got the math, and so the state I worked with the state and got the credits I needed to be able to teach, and I landed in adult ed. I felt so lucky. I'm like, I don't know how I deal with discipline in schools, and just to have, literally, like I said, all my students had a goal. They didn't want me wasting their time.
Right.
I need to learn this algebra to learn to do this. And yeah, I got lucky there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Adults are hard to work with though too. It's different. It's different.
So for the most part, I mean, I guess I had some college prep students that were, they needed algebra 2 credit to get into the school they wanted to. So I had students like that.
Right.
But most of them had issues with high school.
Mm-hmm.
That was a challenge for them. They had been expelled from school, or really negative reactions. At first, the adult, so I was in Bucksport, and the adult ed was in the elementary school, which was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
It was like we'd be in class and the little kids walking by holding hands and stuff. It just made this great atmosphere.
So it was during the school day.
Yeah.
You were there. Oh.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it wasn't in the evening.
No, but I was a full time.
Oh, okay.
Yep, we were. Yep, pretty much school hours.
Oh, okay.
We were there. Then, so at first we were in the elementary school. Then it got moved to the high school, which was a bit problematic because these people had issues with high school and now had to be around high school kids. And
Right.
even though we were in a portable out behind, so
Mhm.
the elementary school was awesome to be in that
Yeah.
atmosphere. I heard an interesting thing. There's another podcast I listened to, Lex Friedman, who's he's from MIT. He works in computer intelligence, automated learning and stuff like that. And he grew up 13 years in Russia, and then moved here. He's around my age, maybe a little bit younger. And he was saying how the biggest difference he noticed from the Russian system to our system was as soon as they found something that you were special in, you got pulled out of your group and accelerated in that. So if you showed promise in math, you got immediately pulled out, and you
Yeah.
were put into a group of other people accelerating math.
Yeah.
And I think, and he said here a lot of times, he thinks the issue that we have is that we teach the lowest common denominator a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I know my girls, every year in math, they'd be like, we're doing the same thing we did last year. We're doing the same thing,
Yeah.
Or the class is moving so slow, it's boring. What are your thoughts on that? And how do we address that? Or
Yeah.
it's a tough thing because
That
you want
is,
everybody.
right.
I get what we're trying to do. You want everybody coming along.
Right. Well, we are required to differentiate. And if it's in the high school, they may pick courses that
Right.
are
Right.
ability
Right.
grouped. On the lower grades, we try to do smaller groups, but it's always a challenge because you do need to, what we're trying to do is instead of accelerate them, we're trying to get them thinking and have it wider. So let's say let's do the algebra. So algebra, instead of going faster and just getting through the book, going wider with that concept and
Right.
having the thinking deeper.
Right.
So that's the key. It's trying, because that way they're not going so fast that they're skipping things either.
Right.
So it's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. But that's why small groups and a lot of the coaching I do right now is with teachers who are trying to get a small group going here and then having the rest of the class doing something
Right.
different.
Right.
But that is a challenge.
But you can see how your once more rigid classroom
Right.
didn't fit that.
It did
what
not
you
fit that
adapted
at
to.
all. No.
Right. Right.
And getting the students in small groups and talking, you could actually, because you're not, let's take math again, because I've done a lot of work actually with math, is if you get the students talking and discussing their thinking and how they solve a problem instead of just procedural and saying, memorizing the steps,
Right.
and by them sharing with each other, hopefully they're teaching their peers and they're learning from their peers because we all think different.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Yeah, an example of that is I resisted with my husband playing cribbage for years and years and years because he's like the cribbage guru.
Right.
And I'm like, I can't do all that math in my head. It's just cribbage. You're only counting to 15. So
7 plus 8.
right,
Right.
And 6 and 9. So
Right.
you learn that. So finally, a couple years ago, I'm like, okay, I'll play with you, or at camp.
Right.
Nothing else was going on. And so we started having conversations about how you're thinking about numbers and how you're pairing numbers.
Right.
And I can sometimes beat them now.
Right.
But that gets us to students and student thinking. And if we can get those students showing that if they have an image of math, and we're doing this with K1-2 right now, images, and then they talk about their reasoning and their thinking and what they see for numbers
Right.
within that, that dialogue helps everyone,
Right.
no matter if you're advanced or low.
Right.
And there's a whole concept called number talks, where you start every class off just talking about the numbers or the image or how you solve the
Right.
problem. So I think that's kind of the solution
Right.
to some of those problems. But I think also in high school, you are going to have some students go further
Right.
and want to go deeper.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
they are more ability grouped
Right.
later on.
Right. Yeah. I know when I started teaching math, I learned it at such a different level than I ever knew it before.
Right.
You know, because you have
Yeah.
to,
Right.
you know, I got to engage
Yeah.
with my student, and
Yeah.
and like you said, they're thinking about it a different way. So now I have to change my way to match their way to see how they're getting through to help them
Right.
solve.
Yeah.
And once again, I got lucky in adult ed because for the most part it's one-on-one, or I'd be teaching 3 classes, but I only had 3 students.
Yeah.
And I'd just be bouncing between them and
Yeah.
interacting between them. And
Yeah. But think how much you learn by listening to their thinking.
right. And I know I see my girls helping other students that are struggling
Mhm.
in something, and they're having to do that. So they are learning at a different level.
Yeah.
It's keeping them from getting to the higher levels of math earlier, I guess. But they're learning their foundation so much
Right,
better,
right.
which is also as valuable as
Yeah.
getting farther along too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not all about speed. A lot of times, if you have someone who excels in math at a young age, it's because they've memorized a procedure, not because they
Right.
understand the math better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, my students used to get so frustrated because I wouldn't every day, like we'd go back to fractions, I'd show them a different way. And like, okay, we're gonna do it like
Yeah.
and they're like, why do I have to learn so many different ways? I'm like,
Yeah.
I want you to understand it. I don't want you
Right.
to learn the procedure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I used to teach division, multiply, subtract, bring down, multiply, subtract, bring down. They weren't learning anything. They were just learning. Then we go math, serious business, math, serious business. So it was a mnemonic device.
Right.
That's not good either. So
Right.
that's when they were all sitting in the rows.
Right. What was there was a flip and multiply of fractions or something like that.
Yeah.
And every student I have always wanted to flip everything. They just wanted, they didn't know why they were flipping it. They just knew that flipping was something that they did.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So they were
right.
always confused.
Right. Right.
It's
Yeah,
because they
you
didn't
flip the fraction. Yeah.
they
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
understand. You know,
Of course not.
So it was,
yeah.
yeah. And in adult ed, I quickly learned that that's like, oh, teaching somebody, it works like adding fractions and multiplying fractions, the difference between them. And they'll learn the one
Exactly.
rule when they're in it, but then they get to the other one, and then once they're removed from it, they forget and they mix up the rules because they didn't really learn.
Exactly.
They didn't really understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of times that we tend to teach like we learned.
Right. Right.
Because what else do we know? So until we kind of get outside the box there,
Yeah.
you don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. I got so lucky. It was probably 5th, 6th grade. I remember I was in a classroom and we basically had there was 3 tiers. You know, the smartest students, the middle,
Right,
and the
right, yeah.
lowest. And
That's the way I was in middle school
Right.
or junior high back
Right.
then.
Right, exactly. And I was definitely in the lower tier because school was a blur to me at that age. Like I wasn't. That's something I want to get to too. But I happened to be. I remember clearly being in Mrs. Dufour's class and sitting there, and the math. I could see what she was teaching. I'm like, why aren't we just doing it this way? Like, why do I have to do all this when I can just
Right.
get to the answer this way? And
Right.
I remember her like, Ben, can you stay after class? And I figured I was in trouble, of course. You
Right,
know?
of course.
And she's like, you don't belong in this class. And she went to bat for me. But they didn't really, the school didn't have a way to have somebody in different tiers. Like, how can you be in a higher tier of math, but not in the lower
Oh,
tier?
right, yeah.
No, it was just.
yeah. It's a logistic
And,
problem.
Right.
Yeah.
And somehow she got me out of that. And a similar thing happened in middle school where I remember that teacher, similar kind of thing happened. And all of a sudden I went from being in the low middle tier to being with the super smart kids in the school. Like,
Wow.
oh, I don't belong here.
Yeah.
I remember
Imposter syndrome.
being so intimidated that I was in the class. We're doing trigonometry. I just came out of like adding and subtracting. What's
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I got lucky there.
Good.
And that's the one thing. But
Yeah.
since I'm on the topic, I'm so lucky. I feel so lucky to have girls, and that they don't take after me. And I feel like looking at it, school was made for the way Kaylin and Logan are, and it so wasn't for me as a young boy. Yeah, my first chunky years was just a blur. I mean, I was ADD before ADD was a thing. I don't think I was somebody that bounced around. I wasn't like out of control, but paying attention for long periods of time was just not where I was maturity wise. And then middle school was all, girls. That's all my focus was. And being funny and whatever I had to do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't till like my junior year probably that I started. Oh, I need to start paying attention. And I was able to pay attention.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? On girls and boys, and it's such a tough.
It is. Yeah.
You don't want to separate them,
No.
but they learn so different. Like I wondered to myself, like, so I thought maybe if my parents bribed me more, if I had a carrot at the end.
Yeah.
So I ended up bribing my girls, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, Dad, you owe me money." Like it was never their motivation.
Right,
They
yeah.
didn't need that. They were going to get the grades they were going to get.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they needed to be bribed.
Right, and I look at myself now, like I exercise every morning. I feel great for exercising. We'll get into that, but if I got my energy out of my system early in the morning or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that would.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think every person's different. I hate to stereotype between girls and boys.
Right. It's
But
generalized.
I also, there are girls that have attention
Oh,
problems.
absolutely.
And there are boys that don't. But it does, there are definitely, avenues that we could stereotype. I don't know.
But even if we're just put in general, the kids that can't pay attention, they can't keep their attention, even though you can clearly tell, like, I would get decent grades on tests because I could pay attention enough
Mhm.
to be able to do it, but I never did homework. You would not like me as a student.
You're probably the little boy that needed the box of books to take to the office, and then the office calls and you have to take the box of books back to the classroom just for a little walk halfway through.
You're probably right. Yeah.
Some little tricks like that, but
Yeah.
I'm watching the kids. I've been working in a kindergarten classroom, which is completely out of my element, and I'm having such a good time in there right now. And it seems like it's 50-50 with the boys and girls right now. But middle school, the boys do seem like they're maybe 50% of them are really want that leadership role, and that could be acting out
Mm-hmm.
the way to get there. But in high school, they sometimes calm down a little bit too.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, and I had sports in high school. Sports, there was, if you had bad grades, you weren't on the sports team. So I didn't want that to happen. And then around my junior year, there was if you got good enough grades, you could have an honor pass, and then you'd have to go to study hall.
oh wow.
I was like, okay, that's
Yeah.
the carrot I need.
Yeah.
And but that was enough to motivate me.
There's your bribery.
Right, exactly. Well, that's why I
Didn't
thought
have
it
to
would
be
work.
money.
I didn't have, I could save a lot of money on my girls. Man, report cards would come out, I'd be like, oh no, how much did I say I was going to give them?
That's funny. That's funny.
One thing that came up just a couple days ago, which I was thinking about, and I think when I was teaching adult ed, IEPs were just starting to become kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It probably was a thing more in regular school, but we tailored our education to everybody anyway, so it wasn't really something that we had to deal with. But there was an interesting thing. So one of my daughters, one of the students left class to go take a test. So like the students were all together, it was test time, and she was able to go to a separate classroom
Mhm.
and take her test, which I completely understand why that is. But I've always felt like you need to challenge your weaknesses.
Mhm.
Not, if you have a strength, and I'm making a lot of assumptions on this student, which I have no idea. This could not be the case, but I'm guessing she has some anxiety about taking tests in a group.
Right.
My initial thought is, well, then we need to keep her in groups a lot
Right.
to strengthen that
Mhm.
weakness. Like I was a poor reader for a long
Mhm.
time. I need to strengthen my reading. I didn't need more math help
Right.
where I was already good. Do you feel like IEPs kind of work that way?
I don't.
I don't even know if I'm using the right
I think
term.
it depends on the person, because I think we do need to challenge ourselves, and that's you and I both like to challenge ourselves, do things that are really hard,
Right.
or things that we're not good at. That's why I swim sometimes, because
Right.
I'm not good at it. But I think also depends on the reason for giving the test. So if you're giving a test to see if they know the content or if they're understanding the material, and that's the way they will shine, maybe. If your goal is to help them later in life meet challenges, then
Which is kind of the goal.
yeah,
right?
that is,
I mean,
yeah,
I remember speech class for Logan was traumatic.
really.
She had
Yeah.
such and it didn't help that Cameron's like, it's the easiest A ever. Like why?
Just
and
give it a
Logan's
test.
in tears,
Yeah.
just
Right.
that she got through that
Mm-hmm.
made her better.
Right.
It
It depends on your goal.
Right.
And if the IEP goal is to find out if they know the math, then they probably should be in a conditioned area that
Right.
they can show the math. But if it's just lifelong learning, and what are our goals? It could be any of those. So
Right.
maybe that's what needs to be taken into consideration with how many times are you taking a test right now, day in, day out?
Right.
You know, I don't know.
Right.
How many people are taking adults? Some are. And I don't know, I'm a better test taker now than I used to be.
Right.
But I don't think it would have made a difference if I was in a small group or a big group.
Right. I had
Yeah.
one student that, she was one of my success stories. She was trying to take the GED, which by the time she got done, it wasn't the GED anymore, it's the high set, or I can't remember now. But in class, she knew the information,
Mm-hmm.
and she'd take that test and fail it.
Yeah.
Over and over and over. She must have taken it 6 or 7 times.
Yeah.
And it's like, it was so hard to like go over the information, and we'd try to make her uncomfortable, and that we'd have other students around her and try, and she finally passed it. I was quite proud of her for never giving up, you know,
That's
because
good,
she'd take the
yeah.
test
Yeah.
and we wouldn't see her for a month because she feels like a failure, you
Right,
know.
right, of
And
course.
sometimes we'd call her or send her
Yeah.
an email, and then she'd
Yeah.
come back in and we'd build up again. Yeah, that was.
That's hard. You know, and the opposite extreme happens too. You have some people who are just really good at taking tests, and either they've just memorized it quickly and they forget it the next day,
Right.
or they just are good at reading the questions
Right.
and whether they know the content or not. So
Yeah, it was
that's another whole issue too.
Yeah, I was a confident test taker.
Mm.
Because I think from years of just not knowing the information and having to find another way to get by.
Yeah. Well, if you read the question, they say always or never. You
Right,
know that.
Right. Is there anything you wish parents knew about teaching, or wish they were more aware of the challenges that or what you if you could kind of put into parents' heads some kind of information that would help you do your job better?
I
It's a
think
strange
that,
question.
I think that's a really good question. I think that we have to look at our goals for young people. And I mean young people anywhere from birth to 30. Or beyond, actually. Anybody, any age. Our ultimate goal in life for anybody is to be happy. It doesn't mean that they're rich. It doesn't mean that they're successful with the stereotypical success,
Right.
but it's just being happy.
I completely agree.
And I think if parents don't worry about what college they go to and how much it costs, or what letters they have after their name, I think they need to focus in on what will make my child happy,
Right.
and myself happy, and our family happy. I think that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
So keeping that into perspective, and a lot of time being happy might be being outside. It may be working with your hands and having that kind of a job. Not everyone has to go to college.
Right.
And most people need to go in the direction of what they enjoy.
Right.
And maybe it's going to change a lot. Many people have many different careers because they like the goal of changing things.
Absolutely. I completely
So
understand that.
yeah,
Yeah.
you've done that, right? So
Yeah.
okay,
And
so talk about that.
I love the adrenaline rush of starting a new job, especially where
Yeah.
I've found a way to get myself the job where I might not have deserved it, which is almost always
It's
been
like
the
test
case.
taking.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I usually could interview pretty well. And I get there and be like, oh no, now I need to step it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. There's a rush there. There's
Yeah.
a challenge there.
Yeah.
And I do like the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
Go ahead.
back to my question a couple days ago: are you an electrician and a plumber? That's what I need.
Not certified either, but yes,
Perfect.
I've done all of it. That was actually so I built this house.
Yep.
I did all the electrical,
Uh-huh.
And I had a cousin who was an electrician that would kind of like supervise me here and there. But nothing's burnt down. It's
That's
been 10
good.
years, you know. So I'm a novice,
go.
but yeah, but I love learning that.
Yeah.
I have to check myself not to let myself get too overconfident because it is electricity and
Right, it
there's
is,
real
yeah.
danger.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. In plumbing, I do pretty well.
Good.
So yeah.
Good. We'll be calling you.
I did hear it was an interesting thing that an article I read, or I should say I read some of it, but it said, and it was years ago, that they did a study on all these different types of learning that parents do to help their kids accelerate.
Mm-hmm.
And they found no correlation to success whatsoever from one over the other. But the one predictor of success was that the parents were involved.
Oh, yes.
You know,
yes.
just being a parent involved.
Right.
But I think there's also what that study might miss is a parent can be too involved too. You know, kind of taking roadblocks out of the way. You know, helicopter parenting and then now snowplow parenting. Have you heard that?
I haven't heard snowplowing.
Where they just take all the obstacles out of the way. They just clear the way.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Which is definitely you have to find that line of challenging your kids and letting them find success and failure.
Right. Isn't that how we learn when we fail?
Absolutely. Yeah, my best life lessons are through failure.
But it really stinks to have to learn that way. But you do learn a lot that way.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
What would you recommend for new teachers?
Oh. I actually had the privilege of working with all the new teachers in the district every year for the last 4 years, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that teachers need to know right off the bat that we don't all teach like we learned, because there's still people who are used to learning through lecture, and instead of the teacher talking, the students need to talk. That's my big thing. And questioning techniques, they need to ask open-ended questions that get the students thinking.
Right.
So I would say those are the major things: student thinking and student talking. Having student-led classrooms, especially older students.
Right.
But even those kindergartners and first and second graders learn to talk, and they're learning routines to talk, and practicing their talking, and having strategies with that. So I think going in that direction right off the bat every single year makes their life easier, and their students' learning just elevates.
I remember, so in college, I was like a BC student, and I jumped to being an A student, like overnight. And the reason was there was this girl in my class, Sonia, who showed up to class without a notebook. And I was like, she's so much of a badass.
Yeah, she memorizes everything, right?
Well, I stopped taking notes not long after that, and I jumped to being an A student overnight.
Oh.
And it was my notes. I remember like being drilled into me in school, and this is just to illustrate how some of the ways we've done things don't always have these perfect notes, and my notes always look perfect. My spacing, my bracket, my bullet points. But I was spending so much mental focus on getting my notes perfect, I wasn't absorbing the information. And I'm such a visual learner, sitting there and paying attention to a teacher and listening to them and following the story, whether it's a social studies class or what.
Right.
When I stopped taking, now I still had I had a daily planner for, okay, this is an important date, or need to do this, or whatever. There was some highlights that I would obviously still take down. But once I stopped taking notes, which I would not recommend to most students, but that after that, my grades across the board and everything went up.
Right.
Yeah.
Because everybody learns differently.
Right.
I'm kind of halfway in between. I can write some things down, but I need to be a good listener. I'd be best off videotaping it, watching it again.
Right.
That's why the flipped classroom would work well for me, is have a video, listen to it, then listen to it again, take a few notes, and then go over my notes if I could listen to it a third time.
I remember and I never done this, and my mother got her master's in education. Oh no, it was a doctorate, but one of the advanced degrees from Maine, and I remember she used to have a tape recorder. It's before video, but she used to tape.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
she obviously would come home and study with the tape recorder.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Which, it makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
But I never
Yeah.
did that. I never
Right.
found the discipline that she had.
So she learned the same way you did.
I'm guessing so.
Yeah.
I would love to.
Yeah.
I need to ask her about that. It's just
Yeah.
one of those memories that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we've already covered what you're doing now. You really love what you're doing now, right?
I do. I love it because it's not full time either.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's 0.6. So I have tomorrow and Friday off.
Yeah, and you're working with teachers, which is a different
Yep.
kind
Yeah,
of.
but I'm in the classroom with students. This is my
Right. So-
Last
so
year
it's
was
like a
hard.
hybrid.
Last year was hard because of the remote, and so I had 14 remote teachers, and I was working with them basically full time, and then sometimes with the new teachers, but basically on the computer all day long, and I found that really challenging.
I bet.
Because I do like to talk to people and I really miss the kids, and it was hard.
Right.
It was really hard, especially the high school students. They were home and they were lonely, and a lot of their friends were back in school because they were hybrid. I'm talking the fully remote students every
Right.
5 days a week. That was just so hard. And even like the K-1-2 kids, they had to learn how to use the computer. Their parents had to be there. It was just really hard for everybody.
Hard on the parents, and then that
Yeah.
trickles down to them. That the kids are
Right.
feeling the pressure too. And
Right, and some of those kids who were kindergarten or first grade are having a really hard time being back in full time now too,
Right.
because we don't have any remote this year.
Right.
So
I read an article in Brewer. I think they found that they had some students had success remotely.
right, yeah,
And did quite well. So
Right.
they're trying to open that up for some students.
yeah,
And I know there's some classes that you need to be there and some that you don't. When I was getting my college credits to teach the couple classes I needed to have,
Mhm.
I took some remote classes then.
yeah,
And I think I had to take trigonometry in Eastern Maine Community College, and I did in like 2 weeks. I remember the
Mhm.
teacher like, "You
Yeah.
need the final already? I haven't
Yeah.
even written the midterm." Yeah.
yeah,
But it was so nice to be able to accelerate through classes.
because you were doing it asynchronously. So you were doing it was self-paced,
Right.
right?
Which was really nice because
Yeah,
I had the syllabus, I knew what I had to do, all the class, all
Right.
the things, and it was just,
Yeah.
and I had a timeline, like, I had the teaching job, I could start teaching at a certain date, but I needed to have my certificate by then, my conditional certificate at
Right,
the time,
yeah.
so
right.
I had a timeline.
You were motivated,
I was
yeah.
motivated to
Yeah.
get through, but I saw my girls too, that really worked. Certain classes, they excelled in that.
Mhm, right,
And it's such, I know, math-wise, there was so much they had to teach themselves.
mhm,
You know, there's no teacher that they can ask a direct question. They want to get, finish it tonight, and
Right.
they had to figure it out, and they had to work
Right.
through it, it was, I think there was a lot of pain involved that they had
Yeah.
to get through, but I think they learned at a different level.
that's right, because they had that, it was student-centered, and
Right.
it was, they had to be the leaders of their
Right.
learning, so.
Right. Yeah. But there was also a lot of mess. I can't even imagine what it was like for you guys last year.
Well,
And
some of the
just-
high school students looked at the spring before, when we just shut down all of a sudden, and, we were just struggling to get curriculum out to students and such, and they kind of envisioned that's what it would be.
Right.
So when this was much more academic, for the full year, they were a little surprised.
Right.
They thought they were going to sit home and watch TV, I
Right.
think.
Right.
So not all of them, don't get me wrong at all, because
Right.
there were some students, like you said, really
Yeah.
excelled with that, but there were others that
Yeah.
showing up or sleeping in bed, that was really difficult for a lot of them.
I look at myself and I don't know how I would have fared in a situation like that. Yeah, I wasn't disciplined like my girls are,
Yeah,
on their own.
right, so, yeah. Hey, you're just lucky.
I was so lucky because they don't take after me. So you've obviously chosen to live in Maine.
Yep, I grew up in Maine.
Did you ever move out?
I didn't, and I have to say, it wasn't because I didn't expect to, or I didn't want to, but I grew up in Maine, and I'm glad that I've stayed in Maine now, but there was that, like, I've got to go do something right after college. So I was a senior in college, and I applied all over the nation for jobs and teaching certificates and everything, just because I wanted to have an adventure.
Right.
So, it was mostly in the mountains, like Montana and Utah, Colorado.
Right.
Those were the places. And then I met my husband. And he, as a kid, had moved many, many, many times. And he loved Maine and wanted to stay here. So I had a choice, an adventurous job or a husband. So I stayed in Maine and taught for a couple years and chose the husband.
So you think you made a good choice, though?
I think I did.
What do you love about Maine?
The mountains, the things that I was going away for.
Right.
The mountains. So I love to ski, mountain bike. I do like the winters. I tell my mom I don't like the winters because I don't like to be cold, but I do like snow sports. I love the changing seasons. The last couple of weeks have been spectacular in Western Maine with the colors. I think it's a lot like teaching. I like the change. I have to have continuous change.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I always want to be warm no matter what the season is. So
Right.
that's a little bit of a conflict right now. So
But the cold makes the warm.
right, yeah.
You appreciate July.
Right.
When you have
Yeah.
it.
And I love a tropical vacation in the middle of the winter.
Right.
I don't always
Oh, no.
take it
Right.
because we ski, and sometimes our vacations are cold.
Right.
But it's all good.
So I don't know if you'll remember this, but so the first time I remember meeting you or being aware of you was at town council. You and I were being sworn in.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember this. One of the counselors, whoever was talking, said something about, I guess you need to be physically fit or in shape to be on pool board or something like that, talking about the two of us.
Oh dear. I don't remember that.
But I remember thinking, Sue and I are in shape. Like, what does it make you think of a first impression of you? And I don't know if she was a friend of yours or something, but
I don't think so. I don't.
What does it make you think when people think of you as physically fit when they first see you?
Oh dear. Imposter. Yeah, I feel like an imposter because it's a lot of the same thing as learning. I like challenges. So I think, as a kid we skied and we hiked and we camped, but we did everything really at a very moderate level.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it raised my level of awareness that there were things like sports, but they weren't competitive sports. Like in high school, I played basketball and I was horrible. I sat on the bench the whole time. I did try field hockey. I still don't understand the game, so your girls gonna have to teach me. My friend Amanda, who coaches, is like, that's a foreign language to me.
Even when you know it, it's not refereed that way.
So any organized sports like that, I'm not a team sport person.
Right.
And I think a lot of it's just my ability. So more of a individual and, competing against yourself for time. And I think the first time I ever did any kind of a race, I was probably 24, and my friends were we used to have in town here, it was called the Pipeline Ski Race. So it was a Nordic ski race, so cross-country skiing. And all I had for cross-country skis are a pair of old wooden 3-pin bindings cross-country skis. So I'm like, I need racing skis. So my friend's husband bought some old used skis at the ski sale, and they were racing skis, supposedly, but they didn't match. They were 2 different skis. He got a bargain on them.
Right.
So I borrowed those. I borrowed his ski boots. I put newspaper in the toe, and I went out, and I am pretty competitive. I huffed and puffed at that, and I came in 3rd woman overall, and I'm like, oh, maybe if I got in shape. So then I started running that next spring to get in shape, and I was going to really buy a pair of skis.
Right.
So it just kind of changed like that. And then a friend said, "Oh, I saw you running." And she goes, "I'm going to do a triathlon." It's like, "Oh, well, what? Tell me about that." So anyway, she and I trained that next year for our first triathlon. We did the Norway triathlon. We had the best summer ever. We ate rice cakes and peanut butter all year, and we had a blast. And I just built confidence that I never knew I had. So.
Did you have, so triathlon's an interesting sport because did you have much experience swimming before that? Because a lot of people.
Yeah, I actually was a waterfront director at a summer camp,
Okay.
but I didn't really swim. And I didn't have any qualifications other than I was old enough, and then they hired a high school kid that had their whatever you have to have
Right.
for being in charge of a waterfront. So no, I really hadn't done much. I take that back. I did swim for 1 year on the Old Town swim team at the Y when I was like 8 years old.
At the high school.
Yeah, at the high school pool.
The Y didn't have a pool.
Yeah, but that's right. Well, the Y didn't exist.
Right.
So
Right.
it was, Charlie Buck was the coach. And so I swam there, but again, I probably came in last every time.
But so you weren't intimidated by the swim going into your first triathlon? That was.
No, we practiced kicking at each other in the face and stuff
Right,
like that.
right.
We had fun training for that.
Yeah.
So
Very cool.
yeah.
I probably actually know just from our conversation I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask you. So how do you choose in the morning what you're gonna do? Like I saw you biking one day. I'm like, I didn't know Sue biked, and I've seen you run, and I know you swim. Like
How do I choose? Well, it depends on my friends. So right now my friends run Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So and then I try and do one alone on the weekend, and then biking. I was a slow start off with the biking. I'm actually probably my best sport. I don't know what my best sport is. I do too many, so I'm not very good at any of them. Probably road biking is my best sport. But the cars bother me some.
Yeah, that's.
So but I can still, I've done, many century rides. So it's not like I don't ride.
Right.
And we have fun when we ride, but I don't usually ride alone.
Right.
So I tend to chat on the bike with somebody, and that's not really safe either.
Right.
So.
Every time I'm with my mother, she's buying me another light for my bike.
Yeah.
The more lights you have, the more people see you.
Well, that's true. Yeah. So it depends on what my friends are doing.
Right.
I've been doing quite a bit of mountain biking this fall, and I'm clearly not good at that. The back of my legs would show that right now, as you see all the cassette marks on my legs. They are not tattoos; they're real. And but it's just social for me.
Yeah.
So. And I've gone through like running friends, different, depending on where I am and who else is running and how they're running depends on who I'm hanging out with. It's my social life. So, yeah.
Now, when you're mountain biking, you at the mountain or you out in this area?
Sugarloaf.
Okay.
Yeah. So single track there.
Right.
And it's a challenge for me. Those roots and rocks, and it's such a head game.
I used to love
It's
that.
so hard for me to get up over things sometimes because I have to do that self-talk, and it's like if you start to stall out, you have to pedal all the harder. But if you pedal harder, you might stall out still, and then it's over. So, but I really love it.
My coworker that I work with does like downhill mountain biking.
Oh yeah, I don't do that.
That was never.
Yeah.
I like the slow, technical, figure out how to go over these roots and rocks and then here's a little stretch I can go quicker.
Right.
I used to do the University Forest all through college. Yeah. I had a Labrador mix at the time, and him and I he'd pick trails and I'd just follow him.
Oh wow, that's great.
That was some of my favorite.
There's some hard trails there.
There's quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I grew up my backyard was a bike path that went to from the Old Town side that went to the University of Maine. So literally that was University Forest was my backyard. So
that's awesome.
Grew up in there. I remember my dog used to he'd get tired and he'd stop and drink out of a puddle as he was peeing in it at the same time. Like, what are you doing?
I think think I've seen those dogs before.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Let me see. So I see you mostly in the mornings. Have you always been a morning exerciser?
Yeah, this time of day, I'm no good at all.
Right.
I'm tired, and I set my alarm early and get up, and, it might not be pretty the first half hour or so,
Right.
but that's the only way that I can be consistent with it.
Right.
So it has to be social, but it has to be social with people who also need to do early mornings.
Right.
And actually, right now, my ski friends and my mountain bike friends tend to be 10 or 11 o'clock people, but that's okay on the weekend.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I run alone. Pretty much everything I've been doing alone, and I love the mental kind of like I'm lost in my head.
Yeah.
And in the, oh no, is this thing I'm feeling, is this going to be a problem?
Right.
And don't think about it and hope it goes away.
Yeah.
And sometimes it goes away and sometimes it doesn't.
Right. Yeah.
But I've never really run with somebody else. It's interesting what a different experience you're having.
Yeah, because I'm always chatting with somebody. I run alone sometimes.
Right.
And I do enjoy that, but.
Yeah. It's matching paces and stuff with people, and that's, because when I'm running, some days I'm running a fast pace, and other days it's like I can barely get.
We always run slow.
Right.
We're very consistently slow.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and again, over the years, for like 3 or 4 years, I'll run with, the same people, and then 3 or 4 years I'll be running with different people, and it just kind of evolves, and it's just who has the same schedule, really.
Right. I tell Dee all the time that my morning workout, the rest of my day is going to be better than the workout was. I love that. I love that. Just kind of getting it out of my system, whatever it is, thinking, processing, feeling like I've accomplished something before my day starts.
Right.
I
absolutely. Yeah. You don't want that hanging over you all day too.
Right.
So.
And I wish more people knew kind of that feeling.
Yeah.
How good it is to feel good. I think a lot of people don't know what feeling good and feeling healthy is like.
Yeah, I agree. It's a real adrenaline rush and a sense of accomplishment. Then you can just get on with your routine.
Right. So. Right. So something part of the thing of doing this podcast for me that I'm realizing is how much when we meet people, we hear little things and we fill in the blanks with our own experiences.
Right.
Yeah, we're making assumptions on why so-and-so made this choice. And I remember kind of you talking about Sugarloaf, and my experience with Sugarloaf is downhill.
Right.
And then at some point, your cross-country skiing is what you do there.
Yes.
I don't know anything about cross-country skiing at Sugarloaf. I wasn't even aware. I think you said it once, and I looked. I'm like, oh, look at all these.
It's huge over there, yeah.
So what is cross-country skiing like at Sugarloaf?
Oh, it doesn't get any better. So it's.
Well, I think why I'm asking is, so Dee and I have recently started taking up cross-country skiing. We probably 2 years ago we might have got up like 3 times. Last year, a few more.
Yeah.
And we're such novices. And my background is snowboarding, which is such a different kind of, in every way different.
It sure is.
The hills scare the daylights out of me on the cross-country skis. Like I'm still learning how to control. I can snowplow or.
Yeah.
What is it like for you, and what do you enjoy so much about cross-country skiing? Why is it such a draw for you?
Right now, I actually cross-country ski, contrary to whatever I've said here, I cross-country ski mostly alone. Not because it's choice, because all my friends are fat biking right now.
Right.
But I love the quiet
I knew you were gonna say
and
that.
the tranquility of it, but I like to go fast. I'm very confident on cross-country skis, and I used to race a lot from that first ski race, and then I got into skate skiing, and we had a group, Maine.
What is skate skiing?
Skate skiing is, so you think of the classic as like the kick and glide, and so your skis are going straight like this.
Oh, right.
And
okay.
your heels are loose. and then skating, your heels are loose, but it's more of a, you go off to
What
the
you
side.
see kind of in the Olympics. When they're
Exactly,
going
yeah.
up.
Yeah, so that's skate skiing. And I love both. They're two different sports, really. But I love the tranquility of it. I like being able to go fast. I like being confident with it.
Are the trails mostly groomed that you're on?
Yes.
So you're not
Yes.
going deep woods off grid?
No, no.
Okay.
There's a lot of people that do that. That's
Right.
another whole sport,
Right.
the backcountry. And no, I want nicely groomed trails. And then I started actually teaching Nordic skiing. So there you go. We'll trade you that electrical
Absolutely.
plumbing for the ski lessons. And I really enjoyed that for quite a while. But then, you know, you get out there and you get cold and frustrated. And it's like, you know, I could just buy a pass and ski by myself. So my perfect day is to go up on the mountain for 4 or 5 hours, come down, go out for a Nordic ski for an hour or two, then come home to a nice warm house.
So you downhill too?
Yeah, I
Oh,
down
okay.
and I snowboard.
Gotcha.
So
Do you?
snowboarding is not pretty. I'm very
Right.
intermediate.
Yeah.
I can get down everything, but sometimes I fall a lot.
I get that.
Yeah.
Do you ever telemark ski?
I've tried it. I'm horrible.
It's
I have tele skis because I like to skin up.
Yeah. My coworker who's the downhill mountain biker, he was a professional downhill skier, but just I don't know what there's a name for it, but you're just going straight in a straight line as fast as you can down the mountain. Like you're
Yeah.
just getting top speed kind of thing. And then he's transitioned into telemarket ski, and he talks, and he's been doing it for years. He's like, everybody you see on the mountain does it wrong, and he's like
I'm one of those people.
He says
I
the
can't do
snowboarders
it.
pick it up so much faster.
Mm.
He's always talking about the rhythm of it. When you're in a corner, it's just a slow. You're not. He's like skiers tend to want to like force down the mountain.
Right,
He goes,
yeah.
But you need to be smooth through it and feel
Right.
the mountain,
Yeah.
which is more similar to snowboarding. Which I've never done it. I
Yeah.
always look at the telemarkers and think, oh, it looks amazing.
Yeah, it is.
And-
Yeah, it looks amazing. I can't do it. I'm much better snowboarder than I am a tele skier. It's
The squat, like just everything about it looks so difficult.
yeah, it's just backwards to me to go
Yeah.
down. I try to do it. I have equipment, but I'm just horrible at it.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
have to say that if I go over and do like a really intermediate lift, I do have fun for an hour or so, but
Yeah.
I'm just horrible at it. The snowboarding is a nice challenge for me when I want to mix it up.
Right.
So,
When
but
you-
people don't always want to wait for me.
Right. So you're not taking a lift to cross country ski.
No.
At Sugarloaf, you're just kind of around the lower levels of the mountain.
Well, there's a whole Nordic center there. It's called the Sugarloaf Outdoor Center at
Okay.
Sugarloaf, and many alpine areas have those. So there's the whole lodge down there, and there are just networks and networks of trails. Some of the mountain bike trails go off those, but it's bigger than the single track.
Right.
So
Yeah, I'm with you. The quietness, the smells of the woods,
Yeah.
the being out in nature.
yeah,
Do you worry all about the aloneness though? That if something happens.
no.
Nah, Dee's always
No.
talking about bears and stuff. I mean, I got chased by a bear up here, so she's always.
Oh, really?
Yeah, on my morning run, that was.
Wow, you got chased by it?
Well, I shouldn't say chased. Nellie's corner store right here.
Yeah.
I just took a right.
Yeah.
And I heard a growl. And I remember crossing the road. I quickly somehow crossed the road, heard a noise going up the tree above me. I looked up and 3 cubs were running up the tree faster than I can run horizontally, which
Wow.
is just blew my mind.
Wow,
and
yeah.
And I turned, and this all just happened. I mean, it seemed like forever. It was
Yeah.
like slow motion, all these
Yeah.
things, the growl, the noise,
Wow.
and then mom bear standing at the bottom of the tree staring at me.
Oh no.
And I'm
Yeah,
looking
you don't
at-
want to be between a mama and a baby bears.
And I was told later by a friend of mine who's an avid hunter was like, Mama Bear was just telling the cubs to get away.
Yeah,
And luckily I wasn't between them. And I
Right.
just
but you could have been.
I locked
Yeah.
eyes with her and
Yeah.
walked away slowly, terrified, looking at
Yeah.
houses like what do I do in this situation?
Right.
I don't know what I
Wow.
would have done
Yeah.
because they're so fast.
I have not. I have encountered a bear out there, but my friend and I were on mountain bikes, and it was just like a cub, and we saw off in the distance.
Right.
So,
And winter-wise, you don't have to worry about animals that
No.
they're hibernating.
right, yeah, and I'd say the most I've ever seen is like at the university. In the spring, coming around a corner with Nordic skis on and down a hill, and having like 10 deer standing there eating off the trail, and that's really not dangerous,
Right.
but it's inconvenient
Right.
because they won't move. They're so
Yeah,
tame
they
over
are
there.
So literally, that was my backyard growing up. And
Yeah.
I was always amazed we could walk up to them. For the
Oh
most
yeah.
part.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're so tame.
Yeah.
So at one point, I think I heard you say you were a race director, or you ran a race at some point.
No, I helped do the Sugarloaf Marathon for quite a few years. So I was one of the assistants to the race director and ran the she took over the marathon from someone else who had originally started it. But that was quite an adventure to get that off the ground, and it's gotten bigger since we all stopped, and the mountain took it over finally. But yeah, that was a good 3:30 in the morning up, get the school buses up to the stop, and so many just little technical things with that.
Have you ever run a marathon?
Oh yeah, many.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you remember your first?
Oh yes, my first was my fastest too.
Really?
Yeah, my first marathon was Lowell, Massachusetts, and it's 2 loops, so it was 2 half marathons.
Right.
That was perfect for me because I was so focused on what I was going to do. I had my goals, and I had practiced my pacing, and I had the watch, and I had the band. It was back before you had the smart watches.
Right.
You had the band so you could read before I needed glasses. So I knew my pacing chart. Didn't go too fast, didn't go too slow. It was by far the best. Since then, it's like, I'm just going to run and have fun. So I did qualify for Boston.
Wow.
With my first, and then did Boston the next year. Didn't pace, danced the whole way, and I danced for 10 miles, and then it's like, I'm tired. I'd spent so much energy, and I think back then the race started at noon.
Mm-hmm.
So my day was over. I'd been riding school buses since 5 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So after that, I became a little more focused. So I've done Boston 3 times. I did Lowell. My husband used to do them with me too. We did Chicago. We did Twin City Marathon.
Wow.
So we used to do our vacations for marathons. I've done Maine Marathon twice. So
your experience of your first is so different than mine. Mine, I hit the wall that
Yeah.
they talk about.
Oh, I've hit the wall, just not on the first one.
Right. And the pain I had, I've never had joint pain. At that point, I'd never experienced any kind of joint pain running whatsoever. And I did MDI.
Oh,
marathon.
that's a hard one.
So they tell me
Yeah.
probably not the best choice for the first.
That's a hilly one. I picked Lowell as a flat one.
Right. And I felt really good. And I think training wise, I'd been up to like 18 miles, and I'd done it like 3 or 4 times. So I felt pretty, and I would get done and felt like pretty confident.
Yeah.
That I still had 8 more miles in me.
Yeah.
And Dee saw me about mile 18 to 20, and I was still, and I kind of wanted to do a Boston qualifying pace, and
Yeah.
I was pretty close to that, and then the wheels fell off.
Oh, yeah.
Around 20, everything locked up. It felt like my tendons were like loose guitar strings. Like every step was so painful. And then I remember, like I tried to run for, I think the first set in, I water stopped and I have a drink and I stopped for a second and started trying to run. I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, okay, I'll run to the next telephone pole and I gotta stop.
Yeah.
And it was such a mental struggle. And I remember getting to like the last mile, coming into Southwest Harbor, I think it is, and people are now there on the side of the road cheering you. It's like, I can't walk. and I
Yeah.
could see I'm walking, so I
Yeah.
ran. It was the most, well, I think I've had more pain before, but sustained pain that I've pushed myself through.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to put a smile on my face. I got to that finish line, they gave me my medal, and Dee was right there, and I just bawled. It was, and I'm
I've
like,
been there. Yes.
I'm like, never let me do this again, ever. And I didn't do it anything like that again for about 6 or 7 years, and now
Wow.
I'm hooked.
Yeah.
I think
You're doing the Ironman now, right?
I've
Yeah.
done 2. I'm trying to run 100 miles right now.
Oh
That's
dear.
my-
Ultras.
I love ultras.
Yeah.
It's so it's funny. I have a cousin. Him and I are kind of both at the same level, pushing each other. He's in Portland, I'm here,
Yeah.
but we're trying to figure out the keys to get that kind of distance. But the mental challenge of it, and it's funny. I find that I'm like an addict chasing that high of that marathon, even though it was so difficult,
Mm-hmm.
and I pushed myself through it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to experience that again.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. See.
My, well, I did Lowell, then I did the Boston that I qualified for
Right,
that time,
Right.
and danced the first 10 miles. And Heartbreak Hill broke my heart. And I finally found my family at the family meeting place at the end, and just the crying started too. But part of that was probably just so emotional because of, I can't believe I ran Boston Marathon,
Right.
that kind of thing too,
Right.
because that imposter syndrome keeps coming back. But that was my worst pain. I prepared better since then. I don't know why I didn't prepare for that one after I had done such a good job with the first one.
Right.
So.
Yeah, for me, it's been, I think, well, as you know, doing that kind of distance, you can't digest enough. You can't get enough calories into your system to maintain the whole way.
Yeah.
And I've been running
Yeah.
a lot more fasted, has been a key, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot fast. I've done 30 miles fasted completely.
Really?
And fasted from the night before.
Oh my.
And
See, I'm just the
yeah.
opposite. I eat the whole way.
Right. There's some of the science behind it, I think, is if you can get your body more efficient at burning fat. If your body wants glucose, it's like,
Yeah,
give me
right,
sugar,
right,
give me
yeah,
sugar,
yeah,
give me, and it doesn't have sugar,
Right.
then fat's your other resource, and you carry a lot of calories in fat.
Yeah.
And you can't, it's a slower burning fuel, so it works good for a marathon kind of pace.
Mhm.
And so I kept hitting the wall. And then I had my first Ironman last year. I had such digestive distress.
Oh yeah.
My stomach just
yeah.
I dropped 2 hours off my time this year.
Wow.
And it was just,
Wow.
but I fasted.
Huh. Isn't that interesting?
So I ate on the bike.
Yeah.
I had gels and
Yeah.
even though I'm trying to do more real foods and less sugary,
Mhm. Yep.
like dates and things like that.
Right.
And then I just no calories on the run, except maybe like some Gatorade here.
Wow.
And it worked
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. I've
That's
actually been
interesting.
reading about fasting a little bit, and I just can't convince myself that that's the way I want to go.
I don't do it, so I don't. There was a time, so intermittent fasting I played a little bit with when I wanted to lose weight, which has worked well. But I've done. So this whole podcast thing started. My cousin started a podcast, and I sat down with him. It was his first podcast,
Mhm.
and since then it's too much time and effort, and he stopped doing it.
Right.
But he mentioned to me, he told me about ultra running,
Yeah.
which I'd never heard of that. This is like 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and now I'm hooked.
Yeah.
And he told me about fasting. He's like,
Yeah.
I want to do a 3-day fast, maybe a 5-day fast. He has not done the 5-day I have.
That's funny. Yeah.
It's such an I constantly now have this conversation in my head, wants versus needs.
Mhm.
So I've done a 5-day fast. So I first did a 3-day fast. Then I did a 3-day fast, complete Ironman training the entire time. The first time I didn't do much training. The second time I did all
Wow.
my workouts.
Yeah.
I had energy for all of them.
Wow.
And so now I'll have something to eat, and an hour later I'm like getting the shakes, like I want something. It's like
Yeah.
I don't really need that.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. At five was about okay, I really do need to eat something. But the cool thing that I find about fasting, which I love, there's this mental game that your brain does. I'll be working and doing something, and my mind wants to go to food. It
Right.
wants to think about
Yep.
food. It's like,
Yeah.
stop that, stop.
Yep.
And as soon as I can, like, I've committed to not eating, then all the hunger and everything goes away. I don't feel hungry anymore.
You do get to a point where you stop being hungry.
Right. But your brain wants to go back there and trick you back
Right.
into thinking. Like,
Yeah.
even today, I was on a run, and I felt like I need something. Like, I really need to get it. Like sugar.
Yeah.
I'm like, and I kept telling, I don't
Yeah.
really need this. And once I was committed to, like, get past that, my brain went to, oh, he's not going to give in. Yeah, it's an interesting thing about challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. So I don't know. I'm back to the happiness thing. I
Absolutely.
like to eat.
Right.
So I just
Well,
eat all day long.
that brings up a really interesting point. I heard, so Lex Friedman, who I listen to here, the podcast, he was talking about anytime he goes out to dinner, he'll fast that day.
Oh, I could do that.
Well, so I just did a podcast with a friend of mine a couple of days ago, and I fasted for 2 days before it, and he came over and we had a hamburger before we. It's the best hamburger I've ever had in my life.
Oh yeah.
Because I went 2 days without eating, like,
Yeah.
and it is interesting how you can, we have this constant satisfaction
Yeah.
in our society today,
Yeah.
where we constantly can get food,
Yep.
and you withdraw from it, and it makes I could have had a McDonald's hamburger, and it would have tasted
Right.
out of this world.
Right.
So that there is, talking about happiness, you
Yeah.
actually can manipulate.
That's true. I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's like we used to do a lot of whitewater canoeing, and so if we were doing canoe camping, we would take Dinty Moore beef stew. And my college roommate went with us once, and she goes, "That was so good." And she still laughs about it to this day. She said, "I went home and I bought a can of that. That is the worst stuff ever." But it's because you're hungry, you're outdoors,
Right.
you've had a great appetite, and, cooked on a fire.
We did a camping trip as kids down the Saco River. It was
Yeah.
my family, my aunts and uncles. So we had like 4 sets of aunts and uncles with their
Yeah.
kids, and
Yeah.
we all did the Saco River and camped out in the
Yeah.
river. And my aunt Georgia made Dinty Moore beef stew, but I didn't know at the time. And I remember asking my parents, joke, I was like, "Can you please get the recipe from Georgia? It's so good." Like, that's my
That's the only place you ever want to eat that
Right.
stuff.
right. You own a tree farm business, a Christmas tree.
Yes, we do. My dad started it years ago in Old Town, and he started that as his little gentleman farmer. As he retired, he had an engineering firm in Orono in Old Town, and he decided that's what he wanted to do because he grew up on a farm in Vermont. And so when our kids were little, we all, as a family, would go and help out and plant the trees, and kind of got sucked into it, and it got to be a bigger business. And so as my parents hit their 90s, we started to take it over, and I started doing the wreaths and all that, and we finally kind of got sick of it, and so now we are leasing it out to a family who will eventually buy it from us.
Nice.
So yeah, so kind of a different operation, but
I bet.
yeah, it's an adrenaline rush to have that Christmas tree season and just going through it, but we never, I'd have to say that when the kids were in middle school and high school, we didn't really get to enjoy the holiday season as much,
Right.
because we were so busy or so burnt out from it. So it's kind of nice to see a young family taking it over and taking some pride in it.
Right.
So
Right. What do you have for goals nowadays?
mountain biking right now, because I've just spent 3 weekends mountain biking, so that's fun. Family time, I am looking forward to, I have a granddaughter who is going to be 2 December 1st, so I'm just chomping at the bit to see her out on skis.
I bet.
And And so that's a goal. Family time for them to come over and they can ski and we can ski. I love that.
What motivates you to do the exercising you do?
That's funny. My husband and I were just talking about that the other day because he's like, he goes, not everyone's as crazy as you.
I've got that many times.
So, yeah. He says, how old are you? Well, I'm 64. And, you know, mountain biking and skiing and road biking and running. So, what motivates me? Was that the question?
Yeah. Because there's
I
days.
love the feeling of it. And I'd say the social, but also that physical fitness. And right now, the only thing that really makes me feel fit for exercise is the mountain biking. I feel just a little bit stronger after,
Right.
you know, 4 or 5 hours out on a mountain bike.
Yeah.
So,
My favorite workouts are the ones where I don't want to do it. Like my favorite runs ever are, my alarm goes off, I can hear the sleet hitting the window.
yeah,
I'm like, the last
Yeah.
thing I want to do is go outside and run in this.
right, right.
But then I do it,
Mhm.
and it's like, I can take on the world after
Yeah.
that. Yeah, those are my favorites.
Yeah.
We've recently, so we built this garage this last year. There's
Mhm.
a sauna we put in up there.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Oh, okay.
I love
Where is the
sauna.
sauna? Upstairs?
See where this foam is right here?
Oh, yeah.
It's directly above that.
Oh.
Yeah.
We have a sauna at Sugarloaf that we, outdoors. So you have to go outdoors to get to it.
Do you have to, is it logs or is it electric? Or
It is,
you don't
no,
have
it's
to light,
logs.
you have to light a fire.
Yeah, we bought the stove from either Sweden or Norway and had it
Mhm.
shipped over. It took forever. It took 6 months for it to get
Right.
here. So yeah, and it's cedar on the inside.
Right.
Yeah,
I love, Dee and I will do that 4 or 5 times a week.
yeah,
I suffer more in that. The first,
yeah. It's hot.
we'll do like a
Burns your nose.
oh my gosh, we'll do like a half hour.
Yeah.
And it's usually like 178 degrees. And the first
Mm.
20 minutes, I just love it. It's, the
Yeah.
sweat's rolling, and
Yeah.
then I suffer.
Yeah,
My heart's going. I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
gonna die.
yeah.
I can't get comfortable.
yeah,
And I'm itching to get out of there.
yeah,
I love how I feel afterwards, though.
yeah.
Especially winter. And it's
Because
cold.
because you finally got your blood pumping again, so you're
Right.
not that chilled to the bone thing in Maine.
Right. And and there's so many health benefits to sauna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's indoors.
Yep.
So ours, you can just step outside for
I
a
know.
second and get cold.
Well, this is not. It's
Then-
not heated up there, so you step outside in the
Oh,
winter,
okay,
and it's
that's good, yeah.
it is pretty cold
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah. Positivity. I find from what I know, you seem like a very positive person.
Not always. Not always.
Yeah.
You should have seen when I got home from work tonight.
So how do you deal with that? How do you?
I think exercise, and I'm looking forward to the next 2 days to working in the yard with my husband. Just we're cutting. We burn wood, so we are cutting and splitting and stacking, and we have a wood furnace in our basement, and we're doing that. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So I think that the mixture of being outside and having the change, and I think working part-time really helps.
What about through your years of teaching and staying positive? Like how would
Changing things up, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, like you were saying, that you like the challenge of switching jobs and
Right.
finding new adventures. And I think this new job is different for me every year. I mean, every year, yes, but every day. Like today, I started off in the middle school, then I went to the high school, and then I went to kindergarten, and then I was supposed to meet with, this is when not positive, I had someone cancel a meeting on me, so it's like, don't cancel, my schedule's already too tight. So I'm not always positive.
Yeah.
So I have high expectations for myself and other people.
Right.
So no, I'm not always positive.
We present a good front from what I've seen.
Sometimes.
Nutrition. You happen to say that was an interesting topic.
That is an
What are
interesting
What
topic.
are your thoughts on?
My own worst enemy. I do value good nutrition, and we grow a lot of vegetables. I like fresh fruit, so I eat tons and tons of fresh fruits and vegetables. But, I do like an ice cream cone or cake
Right.
and those things too. But I have to be careful that I don't, because I'm not a little person. So I have to be careful what I eat. I also like a high quality beer, which is a problem
Right.
because it's not good for you
Right.
and there's no nutritional value, but it's enjoyable. It's fun. So.
You gotta have a balance.
That's
between
right,
what's-
exactly.
Right.
That brings me back to that happiness thing
Right.
too. So it's
Yeah.
fun. So.
Yeah, I find I have when I'm setting a goal for a race or whatever. So then as I'm getting closer, it's like, okay, I'm 3 weeks out. I really need to lock in.
Yeah.
And then I can be focused, and then I
Yeah.
can let loose.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Paul and I ran Chicago Marathon. And so we decided we were just going to run our own races. And so he got in, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes before me. And along the end, the last 5 miles, they had like pitchers of beer out there and all that. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Came across the finish line, and right there they hand you a beer ticket. And I'm like, oh, no way.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking for him all over. He's coming out of the beer tent. And I'm like, I can't believe you went in there and had a beer right after the marathon. He goes, oh, you're not going to use that ticket? so we have different priorities at the end of the race.
I've done the Millinocket Marathon. That's a really cool.
Yes, that's the
Because-
free one. That
Right, that
yes.
you're supporting the community.
Yep.
And it's amazing to me how many people from the community come out to support
Yes.
it.
Yeah,
It's a really cool atmosphere.
yeah.
Cool is an interesting pun because it's
It's freezing
It's
cold.
so
I've had
cold.
friends that have done it. Yeah.
I finished, so I've done it once. Last year it was canceled. I would have done it, but the year I did it,
Mm.
I finished, felt pretty good. Like I wasn't overly cold at that point.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a bus. The buses weren't there to bring me back to the high school.
Right.
So I had to kind of
Oh.
jog to the high school, and now everything's getting cold.
Right. Right.
And the school had their showers open, so I was
Yeah.
so excited to get a hot shower, and the showers were ice cold.
Oh
I was just shaking,
Oh, no.
and then I had to drive back home, and I remember calling to once again, "Don't ever let me do this again."
There was one year, my friend Stephanie did it that year, and it was really, really cold. That might have been the same year.
I know
So,
a couple of years ago it like sleeted and
Yeah.
the moisture. At least the year I did it was dry. It was really cold
Yeah.
but dry. But that's a really cool.
Yeah.
It's just nice being up there and supporting that area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. So let's do the hope for the future. What gives you hope for the future?
I think hope for the future.
Because there's so much, you turn on the news and all you hear
Right,
is negativity.
right, right.
There's social media and
Yeah.
everything, you know.
My lingering answer is happiness, and not just me, but everybody. And it makes me really sad to see the political divide and how we're divided on so many things as a society.
Right,
And
right.
I think we're already headed that way. I think COVID has just accentuated that. I just hope that people can be happy,
Right.
and that really is. And I guess, with education and sports and all those things put together, I think if we focus not on being competitive with our jobs and not being competitive with our hearts, we're better off to focus on that happiness part.
Yeah, I've challenged myself to be a radical moderate.
That's good. I like that.
Like,
Yeah, that's very good.
not just pursuing happiness though, avoiding unhappiness.
Mhm.
There's so many things that I think people do that just cause them unhappiness, and being on the phone all the time,
Right.
and I actually heard an interesting lady. She was actually like a recovery specialist. She was a doctor, an MD of recovery, and she talked about how we have too much pleasure in our lives, which is
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm.
She was saying because we have on our phones, we have constant, we can always be entertained, and she's like, we need to
Right.
spend more alone time, actually in discomfort. She was saying, which is interesting. That
Maybe that's why we run.
well, she was talking about how in recovery, when you take drugs or whatever, your brain overloads to pleasure, and then our brains are designed to find balance. So if you've gone too much on pleasure, you're overloading. Now you're stuck overloading in discomfort, or however you want to define that. And she's saying if we can challenge ourselves to do difficult things, like what you and I do, running and stuff like that.
Right.
You know, I spend a 2-hour run. I've been in discomfort. You know, even though I enjoy my run, it's still discomfort.
Right. Yeah.
Well, now my brain is adjusting in a positive way the rest of the day, and I think that's that morning thing. I exercise in the morning. The rest of the day, I feel almost a highness.
Right.
And my so when I did my last Ironman, my cousin was he was training for the Ironman, and ended up it was too much for him to take on swimming and biking, so he did a double marathon that day. And we timed it up so we were finishing about the same time, and then we did a quick little post-race podcast immediately after, and the two of us were high. I mean, it was like we were drunk,
right? Yeah,
just giddy,
getting that runner's high.
It really was. So
so
I think pushing to discomfort more can get us to happiness too.
I agree. And that's like you were talking about fasting.
Right.
So by fasting, it makes that hamburger or that Dinty Moore beef stew taste better.
Right. Yeah. I wish
that's a good point. That's a
yeah. Because I think steering too much to happiness can tilt you the other way.
Right.
I do think that we should be avoiding just things that cause us to be miserable too. So it's a tough thing to balance for everybody.
Right.
But, thank you so much for doing this, Sue.
Oh, you're welcome.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to have, if you think of guests to have on.
Yeah, I will.
Please point it my way. It's interesting because we were at the pool board meeting yesterday, and I don't think I'm ready for it, but when there's local elections and stuff, I never know enough. And I'm like, there's no place my vote counts more than a local election.
Right.
You know, one out of a couple hundred instead of one out of a million or whatever.
Right.
And millions. But I never know enough. And I want to start trying to maybe see if local politicians will come on and just have conversations, get to know them, and then have a place if somebody else wants to know more about them too. Yeah, but
we have that for school board right now. It's a running questionnaire thing, and each day they have a different question for the school board.
I want to check that out.
I need to see if that's out to the public. I get them on email through our union, but I think it's out there for public, and I wish we had that for town council. And I do try and watch the town council meetings a little bit,
right?
And that's raised my level of concern.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Sue.
Oh,
I very much appreciate it.